Hello beautiful people, and welcome to part 3 of rank 2 of SPAAGs in War Thunder. This time around I'm going to look at 3 vehicles, one from Sweden, one from Japan and one from Italy. And again I will look at the vehicle's protection, firepower and mobility, and how it all comes together in game. First up we have the Swedish Lvtdgb M40, and allow me to butcher the Swedish Luftvärnsterrängdragbil, which is pretty much translatable as Anti-Aircraft Terrain Tractor. Crew 4, driver, gunner and 2 loaders. Armament 140mm Bofors cannon. Armor 15mm maximum. Speed 44 km an hour equals to about 27 miles per hour. So the first contender is the Swedish one, and I have a lot to say about this one, and it's not pretty all of it, far from it actually. The vehicle itself is a 3-axle truck, and it can reach a speed of 44 km per hour and 6 km per hour in reverse, which is not bad actually. It not being tracked of course means that it suffers in deep snow, sand or water. It being wheeled, it also suffers as the other ones as far as not being able to go up slopes or uphill, and sometimes you cannot even maintain a position, so you slide down a hill, and even if you put it in reverse you just keep sliding down a hill, and that is really annoying. You have a tiny bit of armor on this one, but it's only located to the rear and to the front of the vehicle. The sides and for instance the truck bed is 10mm thick, and the doors and the hood of the engine is only 3mm thick. The only way you can protect yourself from light machine gun fire is directly from the front and directly from the rear. The gun itself is very capable. It's a 40mm Bofors cannon, and you have access to 3 different kinds of belts and 3 different kinds of ammo. The default belt first has an armor-piercing capped shell, then 3 high explosive shells. The second belt, called M36, first has 3 high explosive shells, then 1 armor-piercing capped shell. The last belt is called M43. First you have 3 armor-piercing high explosive shells, and then you have 1 pure high explosive shell. The high explosive shell of course has no penetration, but 3mm, and is only to be used against the aircraft. Then you have a single armor-piercing cap shell, and that one has a nice penetration of 79mm at 10 meters, dropping off to 60mm at 500 meters. And the armor-piercing high explosive shell has an armor penetration of 66mm at 10 meters, dropping off to 48mm at 500 meters. If you look at the vehicle itself and you look at that small info window on the top left of the screen, you can see that it says that the weapon system has an armor penetration of the 79mm at 10 meters. So they just take the one shell, the armor piercing cap on, and put it up there. And I think that's very misleading, because you only get one of those armor piercing shells every 4th round in 2 of the belts. And it should actually state that it only has an armor penetration of 66mm, because that's the one you use all the time against tanks. So it's misleading, and you think you have 20mm more than you do, because nobody is using the anti-aircraft belt against tanks. And even if you do, you would only be effective every 4th shot. And one thing to note also, in the French tree at 3.0 also you find the CCKW, which also uses the same 40mm Bofors cannon. That cannon for some reason uses different kinds of ammunition and has more base penetration of 72mm at 10 meters. This vehicle in a pure tank destroyer role is very capable. The cannon is very strong, and 1 or 2 hits in the side of a tank is enough to blow it up with the explosive filler in the armor-piercing high explosive round. I will say though that if you intend to attack some tanks from the front, don't attack them further out than 500 meters, because otherwise the penetration drops off too much. And at 500 meters the penetration is only 48 millimeters, and most tanks have more frontal armor than that. Now this truck is a pretty long vehicle, and on maps with narrow streets you can have issues navigating those streets. And in this clip you can see that I'm having to back up a couple of times in order to make a turn, and that can be pretty frustrating. But the time of gameplay and positioning, that's how I suggest you should use the vehicle. So find a nice hiding spot, or a good angle, or a favorite spot you will have a great view, and then see if you can pick off some tanks from the side from 100 to maximum 500 meters distance. This is one of the very few track vehicles where you can actually use the gun directly over the driver's cabin. As you can see, the gun itself is mounted pretty high on the truck bed. And that is something you should definitely see if you can draw some uses of. Because I said the only way you can protect yourself just a little from machine gun fire is directly from the front or directly from the rear. Two things to get from this clip. I'm attacking Panzer IIIs at around 500 meters, and that is probably the max distance you should engage tanks with this gun. I believe the Panzer III has turret armor about 48 millimeters, and I can't really pin that at this distance. So this is the max distance, but what I really wanted to show is actually this. I'm making a retreat to get out of there because they've definitely seen me, and they are hitting me with their light machine guns. And as you can see, I'm taking a lot of hit on that 50 millimeter armored plate on the back of the vehicle, and that definitely saved me. I did lose a crew member, but without that 50 millimeters of back protection, I would have been dead. I want to spend a few seconds showing you something that is completely off, and I'm actually upset about it, as upset as you can be with a video game, even though I'm spending a lot of hours playing on it. If you look at the rotation speed of this vehicle, right, it uses a 40mm Bofors cannon, and I know it says 40mm Ivankan M36, but this is just a Swedish army designation for the identical cannon that is this one, which states as a 40mm Bofors cannon. Now, if you look at it, the mount design, how it looks, is identical to the Swedish one. They just call it differently, right? Now, if you look at the rotation speed of this thing, crew, gunner, targeting, come on. Now the base targeting is 14.7 degrees a second. If you look at the cannon, Bofors cannon in the French tree, which is completely identical, 24.5 seconds. So you have 10 seconds, 10 degrees a second faster targeting speed with the French one. So that's almost 50% faster for no apparent reason. And there are small things that are off. For instance, this French vehicle has only a crew of 3, while the Swedish has a crew of 4, which means that the French one actually needs a loader. There's only 2 men operating the weapon system, which means that the firing rate for the French guns should be probably half of it, because it doesn't even have a loader. And yet it doesn't. It's just as fast as the Swedish one, even though it has a crew, even though the French one has 1 crew less. So there's no logical reason, except that the Swedes don't know how to lubricate the turret system, that it loses 10 degrees a second compared to the French one. And that is just utter bull crap, because the Swedes are suffering so badly as it is in the AAA role. The next one which I'm researching is even worse, but I'll come to that later in another video. Same identical cannon, and this one only rotates at 12.5, so that's even worse. And the first AAA, they have which is at 1.3, has rotation speed of 19.9, which is also actually okay, but not more than okay, because it can only elevate 45 degrees, and that's also completely useless as a anti-aircraft vehicle. Well, not completely, but it's very difficult. Whenever planes are in close, you have issues where you simply cannot target them. The same with the French one, the first one. Anyhow, I really hope that Guardian will fix this and then give this one a huge boost in the turret rotation speed to bring it up on par with the French one. Because, I mean, I know that Guardian says they love balance and logic. And let me just say one more thing. So, what did I say? 14.5, right? Let me just take it again real quick. 14.7. If you look at the Russian T-34, the very first T-34 you're getting at 3.3, that one has a turret rotation speed of 17.5. So you're telling me an old T-34 with a two-man crew can crank that turret faster around than 3 people can on this vehicle at the base. It's completely insane, and they really need to change that and fix it. Come on, Gaijin, put on your big boy pants, please. Now in this clip I perfectly demonstrate how slow this rotation speed looks in practice. I'm rotating the turret as fast as I can, and this is how it looks. There's no way possible that you can track planes that are just a little close to you. I think this plane is maybe about 500, 600, 700 meters away from you, and at that distance I can track it. If it just gets a little closer, you can completely forget about it. So you need to either have the plane fly directly towards you, or fly in a straight line, well, maybe not in a straight line, but at a considerable distance away from you in order to track it and keep up with it. And let me show you how I actually get a kill on this one. I get it because he's that high up and flying in a straight line. And I score a crit, and that's, there we go, and that's enough to take him out. And now I'm lowering the barrel as fast as I can, and try to look how painfully slow it is. You can forget using this vehicle close up as an anti-aircraft vehicle. And here's another example of the slow rotation speed and the way I get a kill, but only because the plane is coming directly towards me. So to sum up, long range, or only if they head towards you, you can reliably score a kill with this vehicle as it is. There's another thing that hampers this vehicle in its uses in both anti-tank and anti-aircraft role. You only have 144 rounds with you. So with that few rounds, and we all know how it is whenever you start hitting planes, you spend a lot of ammo. So you can either take 1 or 2 builds with you of high explosive and the rest armor piercing, or you can do a 50-50. But I would probably rather do like 80% AA rounds and then 20% AP rounds. You can dispatch tanks very quickly, and you don't need 144 rounds for that. So again, of course, you have options with this vehicle. Either long range anti-aircraft or close to mid-range anti-tank role. Do not use this one as a close-range anti-aircraft vehicle. You can forget about that. I had a lot of fun using this vehicle as an anti-tank destroyer. Not nearly as much fun as an anti-aircraft vehicle. as an anti-aircraft vehicle, even as masochistic as I like to be in some of my vehicle play, this is just too ridiculous. This is the Tarsei, country Japan, crew 3, driver, gunner/commander, and the loader. Armament 120mm autocannon, armor maximum 16mm, speed 44 km an hour equals to about 27 miles per hour. This Japanese anti-aircraft vehicle sits at 1.7. It uses the exact same 20mm cannon as the previous one that sits at 1.3, the Type 94. The difference, however, is this one has way more survivability, and you get a tracked vehicle instead of a wheeled one. You have access to 3 different kinds of belts and 2 different kinds of ammo. The default belt first fires an armor piercing, then 2 high explosives. The second belt only fires high explosives, and the last belt only fires armor piercing rounds. The high explosive round only has 2mm of penetration, so only use that one for aircraft. The armor piercing round has an armor penetration of 48mm at 10 meters, dropping down to 35mm at 500 meters. The 20mm gun shoots 300 rounds a minute. You have a total of 400 rounds with you in the vehicle. Base turret rotation speed is 28 degrees a second, which is just fine. Now at 1.7, this has a potential to pretty much be able to kill everything on the battlefield. So these 0.4 BR changes makes a huge difference for this vehicle. It's much more survivable and much faster to get around with, and it's very small, which means you can find a nice hiding spot and just wait for something to pass you. Armor wise, you have a maximum of 60mm that can protect you, and those 60mm is directly in front of the gun at the turret height. The rest of the protection is only about 10 to 12mm, which means that it's only good for protecting you against light machine guns. The vehicle itself accelerates pretty quickly, so you can keep up with other light tanks and tanks in general with 44 km an hour. You of course still need to be careful because you pretty much have no armor, but you can easily take this one out and use it as a tank destroyer instead of an anti-aircraft vehicle. It's very capable in both roles. The gun itself only shoots 300 rounds a minute, and I say only because some other 20mm shoot maybe 4 to 450 rounds a minute. So there is a gap between each shell, and it's actually more challenging to get a aerial kill with this one compared to some of the other 20mm. You often need 2 or 3 or more rounds to hit the plane in order to bring it down, and with this somewhat slower firing speed compared to other 20mm, it's a little more challenging to bring down a plane. So it sort of sits between the German and the Italian one. The Italian one shoots 240 rounds a minute, and the German counterpart shoots 480 rounds a minute. For some reason, and I'm sure it's all me, I had a little more issues with killing planes with this one or tracking them. I guess I prefer either something that's a little slower in firing rate or a little faster. It's a very fun and capable anti-aircraft vehicle, and it's also a very fun and capable anti-tank vehicle. It's probably more effective in an tank destroyer role compared to the anti-aircraft role. This vehicle being so small, of course, both has its pros and cons. On the positive side, you are capable to zip around quickly on an urban map, and you can easily hide the vehicle behind bushes or in a forest. Now, and of course the big one on the negative side, you are very easy to get one shot being so small, so it doesn't really matter where you get hit. If you get hit with something that has an explosive filler, the chances are that more than one crew member will be taken out, and that means you're out of the match. So to summarize, it's definitely worth the upgrade, and it's very fun to play. Here we have the M42 Contraereo, and if you look at the word, contra means in opposition of or against, and aero means either aircraft or aeronautical, so Contraereo means anti-air. Country, Italy, crew 3, gunner, driver and loader, armament 4 20mm autocannons, Armor maximum 30 millimeters. Speed 38 kilometers per hour equals to about 23 miles per hour. So first off, this Italian M42 is basically a baby Wirbelwind, or you could call it a budget Wirbelwind. The track basis or chassis of this vehicle is basically the same idea as a Wirbelwind, where you take a previous model tank and slap 4 20mm cannons on top of it. The speed is pretty decent with 38 kilometers per hour. It's not the fastest, but you can keep up with other tanks, so you still have an option to do the close air support, which this vehicle is good at. So the hull has a decent protection with 30 millimeters at the front, but the turret is kind of an issue. You only have 15 millimeters there, so even heavy machine guns, which you will definitely meet at this PR on planes, will cut straight through it. If you look at the turret from the front, there's an opening where you can see the gunner directly, so the gunner has no protection directly from the front, which means that even a light machine gun just can kill the gunner outright, even though he is in a turret. The stock turret rotation speed is 42 degrees a second, and that is very fast. But with the short burst window you have, it's also necessary. With this 20mm cannon you have access to 4 different kinds of bells and 3 different kinds of ammo. The default build first has an armor-piercing incendiary tracer shell, followed by 3 high-explosive shells. Then you get a build called Granata Mod 35 that has high-explosive shells only. Third build is called Perforanti Mod 35, and that only has armor-piercing incendiary tracer shells. And the best build for the last, the Panzergranate 40. This build rotates between 2 different kinds of ammo. First the high velocity armor piercing tracer shell, and then the armor piercing incendiary tracer shell. So even though I haven't talked about the Wirbelwind yet, that sits at rank 3, I'm going to make some comparisons between the ammunition types of the Wirbelwind and then this M42. There's only 0.4 BR difference between the two vehicles, and I know that Wirbelwind sits at rank 3, and this one sits at rank 2. But there's actually a pretty big difference in how the 20mm shells work and how effective they are. The Wirbelwind, for instance, uses a high explosive shell that has a TNT equivalent of 10.2 grams. If we look at the M42 in comparison, that high explosive shell only has a TNT equivalent of 3 grams, so the German 20mm has 3 times the explosive mass. The German Wirbelwind standard anti-piercing ammunition can penetrate 46 millimeters at 10 meters, and it drops down to 33 millimeters at 500 meters. The Italian equivalent can only penetrate 38 millimeters at 10 meters, and it drops down to 27 millimeters at 500 meters. So again, the Wirbelwind has the upper hand. However, the Italian one actually has 1.7 grams of TNT in it, while the German one does not have any TNT at all. Both the Wirbelwind and the Italian M42 uses the same high velocity anti-piercing ammunition though, so they both get the 64 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters, dropping down to 27 millimeters at 500 meters. So ammunition wise and penetration wise in general, it's definitely a budget version of the Wirbelwind. These Italian 20mm cannons have an insanely high fire rate of 600 rounds per minute. Luckily you get plenty of ammunition. You have 3024 rounds with you in the vehicle. So you have access to a lot of firepower, but you have also some issues with it, and some of them are actually pretty frustrating and annoying. Your ammo builds, for instance, are very small. You have 48 rounds per ammo build before you need to reload. However, you have to remember that you have 4 cannons, which means that each cannon only has 12 rounds of ammo before the cannon is empty. So combined with 600 rounds a minute and very low ammo capacity in each build, you basically always run into issues where you need to reload during fights, especially when we're talking about aircraft. And with a stock reload speed of 16.5 seconds, you're going to be pretty frustrated pretty quickly. Often, and I'm pretty sure you'll see this in these clips, you'll see that I'm chasing a plane, 1 or 2 quick bursts, and then you need to reload. Then you can drag it for 16 seconds and wait and wait and wait. And in 16.5 seconds, the plane can easily turn towards you, hit you and kill you, or get out of your firing range. So fighting against planes can be frustrating. However, if you fight against other vehicles, those 16.5 seconds will definitely kill you. And the game working like it does, we also know that the faster firing rate you have, sometimes the game won't register each hit. So often if you empty a build in a vehicle and you don't move the cursor, you wasted a lot of ammo and maybe have not even killed the vehicle in that short window of burst. So knowing where to attack vehicles is definitely important with this one. And I would suggest you either go for the gun or the gunner first. That way, even whenever you need to reload, you still have a chance of survival. Now that I'm talking a little about attacking ground targets, it feels like the guns overpower the chassis itself. So whenever you fire the gun in burst, it has a tendency to wobble, and you can easily lose your sight picture. I think I can show that, or will show that over several times. You need to fire a very short burst, otherwise the barrels will rise quickly over the target, and at longer ranges, half of your ammo will be wasted. So a good aim is actually pretty important with this vehicle. You do have a lot of firepower, and if you can get a very precise controlled burst, you'll bring down a plane in seconds. However, if you miss and you need to reacquire the target, and you miss again, then you run into that crazy long reload period, and that is actually a death sentence, especially if you fight against tanks. Playstyle wise, definitely keep up with some tank buddies, so stay close to the front line or the middle and support your buddies with some close-in air support fire. And of course, the 64mm with the HVAP ammo is also very powerful, so it can also be used as a backup tank destroyer. Your chassis itself can take some hits, but your turret cannot survive a lot of direct hits. And the chassis itself is actually pretty small, and you only have 3 crew members. So if your turret gets penetrated by some heavy machine gun fire, the chances are that both the gunner and the loader will be taken out, and you'll be out of the match. So my mantra with wait until you are sure that you can hit the plane is very important with this vehicle. Definitely wait until they get close to you, so you're sure that your short window of burst actually hits something. Otherwise you just have to sit and wait. It's a very fun and effective vehicle to play, but it has a steep learning curve. But once you master those 420mm cannons and know how to operate them and know how to aim, you're going to be very deadly against planes. I hope you got some new information out of this video, and again, thank you for watching and have a good one.